own condition as we now describe it. So, with this, we end page number 14. Now, I will be reading out page number 10. Hitherto, we have discussed on constraints. However, our conception of freedom changes with our ideas about what we should do once freed from constraints. Some argue that it is enough that we are able to fulfill whatever we happen to currently desire. So, if I desire to smoke and no constraints exist to prevent me from doing so, then I am free. Others argue that by a focus on current unevaluated desires, we misunderstand what is really at issue in discussions of freedom. Such people work with a less instrumentalist, more robust conception of reason and argue that one is free only when there is an absence of constraints and real opportunity to do what we evaluate to be good for us. On this view, if information that cigarettes are gravely injurious to health is available to us, but we continue to both desire smoking and fulfill this desire, then we are not being really free. We are not free because we succumb to a habit of our addiction, completely bypassing, ignoring, or evading what our reasons says is good for us. To fall prey to one's current unevaluated desires in this view is to be a state of unfreedom. Freedom is a condition of leading a life and of doing things that are evaluated to be good for us, to fulfill desires that are judged to be worth having in the first place. This view slowly leads to the idea that freedom is identical with self-realization. The detailed elaboration of different conceptions of freedom is one task of political theory, and the other one is to reason why we should choose one rather than the other conception, why, if at all, one conception is better than others. This brings to me to the second distinctive feature of theory or philosophy, that is, it is a rational enterprise, where the term rational is understood very broadly to mean that the conclusion arrived or hinted at has some discernible structure of reasons behind it. To say this is not to imply that philosophers or theorists do not rely on instincts, emotions, or flashes of insight. Nor does it mean that a philosophical or a theoretical inquiry must possess a definitive argumentative structure of the kind made familiar by logicians, although some philosophies and theories may have some such pattern. However, it does not mean that philosophers and theorists are not satisfied with bland assertions, the flat announcement of a claim, or the presentation of a ready-made proposal. When they make an assertion they cannot be satisfied with providing one reason and stopping the process of questioning. At this point, there can be a reason for a reason already supplied and a reason for the initial reason. In other words, whether stated explicitly or not, there is a chain of reasons that is discernible in a theoretical or philosophical work. Does this mean that we can reach the final reason, a reason beyond which there is no reason, the foundation of all reasons? Some philosophers appear to be obsessed with this idea of ultimate cause or justification of an event or set. But I doubt if we humans can ever get to the bottom of all things. Take the example of scientific theories. Suppose that it is claimed that whatever is a compound, this must be backed by some evidence demonstrating that it is composed of two elements, hydrogen and oxygen, and that this composition is not a mere mixture of features of both, but rather a new substance with features of its own. Furthermore, this evidence must in itself be supported by more general claims about the mechanism by which a process takes place. Similarly, suppose that it is proposed that all children must be provided elementary education, and suppose in answer to the question why it is asserted that education is a fundamental right, then it must also be argued that at least in modern times there is a connection between education, employment, and a life of dignity, and further that a dignified life is a crucial component of human well-being, and so on. So, I have already begun with page number 11, and now I am going on further. This rational structure of theories, their internal requirement that they persistently ask for reasons, makes them, albeit with some qualifications, subversive with the potential to transform societies. The rational component of theory also illuminates another of its important features, namely its aspirations to truth and objectivity. This claim must be made very cautiously but clearly. The truths that theories, particularly social and political theories, aspire to are not valid for all times and all places. The truth of most theories is context dependent and therefore limited to specific times and places. Only the very exceptional theories have a reach that cuts across time and space. Nor is this very achievable, but limited truth in any way final. We must rid ourselves of the illusion that, like God, we humans can stand outside all perspectives and attain godlike objectivity or an eternal truth of the matter. The truth that we achieve is dependent on the collective reasoning of human beings, and even if all rational persons can agree at a given point of time then that they have arrived at the truth of a certain matter, new information or a flaw in an argument detected much later by other reasonable beings can force us to revise our earlier truth claims. Human knowledge can neither altogether escape subjective viewpoints nor be imprisoned within the subjective biases of wealthy classes, powerful political blocs, or even intellectuals. Such views may pass off as knowledge for some time, but sooner or later their limitations are bound to come to light. We might then arrive at some acceptable version that can be rightfully claimed as the truth of the matter, an achievement not possible without the use of reason, although reason alone cannot help us attain it. A fourth feature of philosophy or theory is that it is committed to unearthing the background assumptions and presumptions of our statements, beliefs, actions, and practices. For example, the force of gravity is presupposed by all our situated action. We don't always articulate this, nor are many of us aware that this is so. Yet, without the force of gravity, embodied persons cannot exist on this earth. Similarly, when we set out to attend a class, we make many assumptions which remain in the background as part of our pre-reflective understanding. For example, the classroom is exactly where we left it on the previous day, that the teacher would arrive to take the class, that at least some other students would be present, that the teacher will give the lecture in a language that we speak and understand, and so on. All of us exist, think, and act with these assumptions and presumptions, but do not always articulate them. To take another example, in 17th century England, politicians had begun to think and speak of politics without appeal to religious principles, but frequently they did not acknowledge this. It was left to Hobbes to articulate these new background assumptions and to show that it was possible to conduct politics in a purely secular manner. Thus, within reasonable limits, philosophers and theorists are committed to articulating these background assumptions and presumptions. So, with this, we are at the end of page number 11. So, now we will begin with page number 8. There is a heading: Varieties of Word Dependent Reflections. Word or language dependent systematic expressions or reflections can also be accomplished in multiple modes, in interestingly different ways. The essay is one form, a written dialogue in another, poetry is yet another. Newspaper articles, a mixture of short description and analysis, provide another form. A record of one's experience in a village, the ethnography of a good anthropologist, is a systematic expression of collective lived experiences. Folk tales, more fables, myths and legends, epic poetry, short stories, and novels are all systematic reflections. What has all this got to do with theory? I propose that theory too be seen as a particular form of language dependent systematic expression, different form, but related to other forms of systematic reflections on the world. Like other expressions, a theory articulates in a particular medium a conceptual world lived practically by a specific set of human agents. Moreover, it does so in its own distinctive way. What marks a theory out from language-dependent systematic expressions? I propose that there are 6 such features, 4 of which it necessarily shares with philosophy and 2 that are specific to it. The distinctiveness of theory. The first feature is an almost obsessive and self-conscious concern with the internal structure of concepts, with how concepts relate to one another and come in clusters, and how in turn they mark their own boundaries. A philosopher or a theorist, for my purpose I will often use these terms interchangeably, focuses on the meaning of words, on the different ways in which the words are used so that she can eventually answer questions such as what is justice? What is the meaning of the phrase social revolution, and how is it different from social reform or social engineering? What is the core idea or freedom, if there is one? What are the different interpretations of this core idea? What is the relationship between freedom and equality, and between freedom, equality, and justice? What distinguishes power from influence, force, violence, or persuasion? In ordinary life, we use words more or less unself-consciously, and we are not more normally compelled to ask such questions. But philosophers must raise these questions and understand them in a particular way. When asked what time is, we don't expect philosophers to look at their watches and tell us what precise time of the day is. Philosophers are expected to convey to us what is the meaning of time is and what it is for us to live in time. Likewise, if a philosopher is asked a question about basic needs, he is not expected to supply us with a list of our most urgent desires, but rather to make us understand how needs are different from ordinary desires and what the distinction is between our most inescapable and significant needs and others that at least temporarily we may live without. As long as our purpose is served, we don't ordinarily care whether a word is used literally or metaphorically or both. Poets, novelists, essayists use words self-consciously and with extreme care, but it is not their business to elucidate why they have chosen to use this rather than some other word, or to make explicit connections between different concepts. Now I will be reading page number 9. The job of a philosopher, and insofar as philosophy is part of theory, the job of a theorist is to accomplish precisely this. A full-blooded sensitivity to the entire web of concepts and a commitment to its articulation is the first feature of theory. Let me illustrate this further with an example. Suppose that someone gives a call for freedom. We should all be free. What are people to make of this call? For a start, they must understand what it means to be free. Once they have understood the meaning, or rather the different meanings of freedom, they may ask why they should be free, or at least why they should be free in this rather than some other sense. To be free or from something is to get rid of it. What you wish to get rid of must be something that you evaluate negatively. In the literature of freedom, such things that you wish to get rid of are usually called constraints. So, to be free is to be free from constraints. But what is the nature of these constraints? Surely, our ideas of freedom will depend upon our understanding of what these constraints are. Are these constraints purely physical? Take the paradigmatic example of freedom. A man is in chains. Getting rid of these chains and he is free. The same is true of birds in a cage. The cage imprisons, restricting the flight of the bird, that which is it most prone to doing it and is its nature. To set the bird free is to get rid of the cage. In the same way, prisoners are set free when they are released. Now, have you noticed that our notion of constraint may already have changed with the last example? For at issue here is not merely the idea of physical but of legal constraints. A person may have been put behind bars because he has been caught stealing. He stole because he was physically free to steal, and yet he was imprisoned because it is illegal to do so. Appropriating a thing that by law belongs to another is illegal, and it is because of the presence of this legal constraint that the man was put in jail. To be free then is to be free not just from physical but from legal constraints. Is this all there is to freedom? Notice that both physical and legal constraints are external to the agent. Can a person be unfree not because of the presence of physical and legal constraints? There may be none, but by virtue of psychological barriers, obstructions that are present within his mental makeup. So consider a slave who is set free and who is now pronounced as formally equal to his former master. Suppose that they both compete in an open exam, and while the former master always does well, the former slave simply cannot perform. Centuries of slavery have taken away from him the basic self-confidence required for a good performance, and he is unable to achieve his objectives not because of physical or legal constraints but due to internal psychological ones. A conception of freedom is purely physical or legal terms is unable to capture the mechanism of unfreedom which is at work here. We can similarly talk about constraints which are neither purely external nor purely internal but a bit of both. I mean social constraints. A person is physically and legally free to enter the higher education system. He has done well in his school examinations, well enough to get a place in a decent college. But higher education is costly. There are no subsidies or scholarships. The person is confident that he would do well and he has every reason to feel so, and yet he cannot get higher education. He is severely handicapped by his relative poverty, which is a major socio-economic constraint on what he wishes to do. Implicit in this is a still different conception of freedom. Freedom from not merely physical, legal, and psychological, but also socio-economic constraints. Now we will begin with page number 5 of what is political theory. Why should women and men be treated as equals? What is the appropriate response of the government to mass killings? What is the connection between ensuring employment to everyone and social justice? What is the proper function of the police in a modern democratic state? Workers are beaten up, apparently for disobeying the state. But why should we obey the state at all? Why should we be law-abiding citizens? Similarly, we might ask, why should tigers who sometimes turn man-eaters still be protected? Such questions have to do with right and wrong, good or bad, in short, with ethics and morality, with the normative. Admittedly, answers to these questions may not on their own constitute theory, but what additional features are necessary for them to be deemed theoretical? As theory, political theory must share features with theories of other phenomena. It may even have some features in common with theories of the physical or the biological world. However, by virtue of being political theory, it must possess characteristics that are distinctive. Some of these distinctive features separated from theories of nature, but not from the theories pertaining to human affairs more generally. But its truly distinctive features must flow from its focus on the political. In what follows, therefore, we outline the more general features of any theory, and in particular, elucidate features of a theory of human condition and action. In order to do so, we relate theory to and differentiate it from other forms of systematic reflection such as art, literature, and religious worldviews. Finally, we ask the question, what is political, and outline the specific features of political theory. Now, there is a heading, what is theory? And there is a subheading under it, humans as concept-bearing animals. Now, let us begin with some truisms. No one denies that we are physical creatures, part of the physical universe and subject to the same laws as any physical object. Nor will anyone deny that unlikely purely physical objects, but like other biological creatures, we are sentient creatures. We breathe, we eat, we grow and have sensory experiences. However, what distinguishes us from most, though not all biological creatures, is what we are concept-bearing animals. As conceptual creatures, we are born in a world that is already arranged thoughtfully in particular ways. Consider the following. A child is told to sit on a chair. From a purely physical point of view, chairs are just a piece of wood, nothing else. But it would be odd to tell a child to sit on a piece of wood. What we wish to convey to that child is that a particular piece of wood, when crafted in a particular manner, serves a particular purpose. That it is something on which we sit or with which we can do certain things such as eating, reading, writing, talking, and so on. It is these purposes that we wish to convey to the child, purposes which would not exist unless conceptually formulated. This is true not only of objects such as chairs, tables, blackboards, chalk, the classroom in the school building, but also of human beings themselves. A student interacts with a person standing in front of the blackboard and talks to her not as if she is any odd person, but as one who is there to perform a certain role, that of a teacher. Now I am beginning with page number 6. Once again, no teaching is possible unless all of us already have a rough idea of the social role of students and teachers. The same is true of bus conductors, drivers, ticket inspectors, shopkeepers, government officials, and so on. A society cannot function without these elementary understandings, and so every child is initiated in the social world by an informal instruction in these concepts. Unlike the purely physical, chemical, or the biological world, the human world is conceptual through and through. Plants and most low-order animals live in the world and sense it, but by virtue of living the world through concepts, humans do not merely have sensory experience. Because their experience is mediated by images, concepts, and representations, we might say that human experience is always thoughtful. Humans do not merely live, but have a thoughtful experience of living, what we might call a lived experience. Now there is a heading, Concepts Embedded in Practices. As hinted above, most concepts that we use in everyday living are not formally learnt in the classroom, but are acquired by participating in various practices. Since we use concepts, we may liken them to tools, but this should not lead us to think that we have mental boxes in our head from which we pick them out as and when we need them. Much of our conceptual understanding is available to us as a practical skill or is directly embedded in practices. We are not even aware most of the time that we possess this skill or understanding. This may appear implausible to you at first, but really the matter is quite simple. Several activities you do routinely are not thoughtless but are mostly absent in the stream of your consciousness. How many times do you really interrupt the flow of your activity and think? You just do them without explicitly thinking about them, just as the bus driver changes gears without first thinking himself whether or not he should. You see the object in front of you as a table or a book, and you understand that what you are doing is sitting at the table and reading. When we see a person entering the poll booth and approaching the ballot box, we understand that he is voting. This understanding is direct and practical, not inferred from something that first takes place in your consciousness. It is usually the same with people and social relationships. We might call this an embedded understanding of things, practices, people, and relationships. Now, there is another heading: human expressions. All humans have the ability not only to have thoughtful experiences, but to express these thoughts in different media. A child experiences a piece of wood as a chair or a table, but she may express this concern in a drawing by representing these objects on paper. An actor or a meme artist or a dancer may use her body to say the same thing. A photographer may use the camera for the same purpose. So there are multiple ways of expressing an experience, some word dependent and others not. Besides, we may express this experience in words to other people. Hey, I see a table there. Or I may express it to myself privately. That's a table, isn't it? So some of these expressions are in the outer world, in public spaces, and some may occur inside, privately, as ideas in our heads. These private expressions may be called subjective reflections, a kind of mirroring of the world in our own heads. Now, I have started page number 7, and there is a subheading: ad hoc and systematic reflections. All expressions, including subjective reflections, may occur randomly on the spur of the moment or be arranged systematically. All of us from time to time have spontaneous and random reflections. The chalk with which I unthinkingly and effortlessly write on the blackboard keeps crumbling one day. When that happens, I may interrupt the flow of my action, examine the chalk, and ask if I could not have a chalk of better quality. I have an embedded understanding of what a chalk is and practical knowledge of what is to be done with it. But confronted with a piece of chalk literally melting in my fingers into dust, I may think to myself just what it is made of, whether it is really what it is meant to be. Is this really a piece of chalk? Such random thoughts may occur and then disappear for no ostensible reason, but they arise invariably when there is an unexpected interruption of my activities, when I am faced, for example, with a problem. Now, there is a heading: word dependent and word independent reflections. Suppose then that I don't let this thought disappear. I engage with it, indeed pursue it obsessively. Suppose that now I examine not merely the chalk in hand but the entire box, indeed not just one but all the boxes bought by the department of my college, and arrive at the conclusion that the entire lot is defective. I identify the manufacturer and begin to look at the quality of other lots used elsewhere. Quite obviously, I have begun a kind of sustained and systematic empirical inquiry. When I write a report on chalk produced by the manufacturer, it becomes an expression of systematic reflection on an issue selected for sharper focus. A report is systematic and word dependent, but humans have the ability to systematically reflect and express themselves in a variety of non-linguistic media. Systematic expressions and reflections on the world and on ourselves are found in music, sculpture, painting, dance, pottery, architecture, and so on. A filmmaker or a painter may reflect on the predicaments of modernity or in the futility of war, but without deploying words to convey their meaning. Have you seen the paintings in Ajanta caves, or Madhubani and worldly paintings, or a replica of the Spanish painter Pablo Picasso's Guernica? Many of you may have heard Amir Khan's rendering of Bhairavi or Kumar Gandharv's rendering of Bhim Palasi. These too are systematic reflections. Other forms of systematic reflections use language, but in interestingly different ways. So So with this, we end page number 7. So hello everyone, my name is Nehal Jain and today I will be reading out a book by Rajiv Bhargava and Ashoka Charya, Political Theory and Introduction. So we will begin by chapter 1, what is political theory? I will be reading page number 3 according to the book. It says introduction. So it says a cursory glance at the newspaper brings us face to face with dozens of political issues. The Supreme Court pronounces that there should be no reservations in private colleges. University students demonstrate against the government to demand the proper implementation of the Rural Employment Guarantee Act, that is REGA. Women's organizations complain bitterly about the unequal treatment of women and girls in our society. Trade union leaders condemn police brutality against workers. Animal rights activists demand better protection for endangered species of tigers. The Prime Minister apologizes to the Sikh community for moral indifference and neglect by the Congress government at the time of the 1984 massacre of Sikhs. The government gives up the sale of public sector units. The Rajya Sabha passes a bill to grant Hindu women an equal right in ancestral property. The Chief Minister of Gujarat insists that Gujarati identity and pride is wounded by opponents of the Sardar Sarovar project. Now, what in your opinion makes all these issues political? Do all these issues have some one thing in common which defines them as political? Consider the examples that refer to reservations: Rega, the massacre of Sikhs, equal rights to women in ancestral property, and the sales of PSUs. All these refer to some institution of the state: the judiciary, the government, the legislature, the office of the Prime Minister. They also refer to the decision-making power of these institutions. Does it follow that the term political refers to any public agency with the power or authority to take decisions? Notice too that all these decisions possess the potential to have an impact on almost every member of the society in question. Even when a particular decision appears to target a specific group, it relates to and has an impact on other groups. Does the term political then refer to the common power to take decisions about the common life of society? It would be a mistake to confine this term only to this common power of state institutions. Consider once again the example of women's organizations protesting against the exclusion or unequal treatment of women. On the understanding of political arrived thus far, this action of a group of women is not political. Why so? Because women organizations are not clearly part of a state. But surely, on any intuitive understanding of a political act, such a protest by a women's group is political. If so, this must compel us to change or broaden our understanding of the term political. This protest is political not merely because it is a collective act by a group against some continuing social practice or an earlier decision of the government, but also because the very object of this protest, namely the unequal treatment of women, is part of what we understand by the term political. And why is this so? Because to treat women unequally is to exercise power over them. Men make women do things which, left to themselves, they may not do. This exercise of power is also a part of what we mean by political. Now I will be going on page number 4. A closer look at most of the examples points to another feature of the political. The political is that domain or dimension of our collective life where we fight for our interests, make claims, including moral claims on each other, where important and urgent issues are contested. But demands, claims, protests, and complaints cannot but generate conflict. The political, it appears, is inherently conflictual. Finally, we might look at the political in a still different sense. Implicit in almost every example is a vision of a future world, one where all are equal, or even animals are treated with some respect, or where force is replaced by deliberation, and so on. The political, then, is also where new worlds are imagined. Clearly, the term political has no fixed or unique meaning. It has multiple, though related meanings. One objective of these understanding chapters is to enhance our understanding of the political and to draw the attention of the reader to its multiple meanings. Our second task is to understand what we mean by the term theory. Though not easy, it is important that this be done so that eventually we can put the terms